Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for the 19th of June, 2015. Weekend is coming up. What's the tropics going to be like? Well, nothing to worry about out there. At least over the water, we still have to worry about the remnants of Bill, now situated in extreme northern Arkansas, southern parts of Missouri. Take a look at a satellite picture of it here. Very well defined still for a tropical depression over land and some of this rugged terrain around here. If you know the geography of the area, you know what I'm talking about. I got the Mississippi River coming down this side and lots of flooding left over in parts of Oklahoma. Tragedy, unfortunately, in the Ardmore area with the loss of life there from a young person swept into a creek due to the rains from this system. Cannot emphasize enough that people need to understand tropical cyclones have all these different weapons they can hit you with, and rainfall and the resulting freshwater flooding is definitely one of those weapons. Heavy rain over a fairly short amount of time can lead to a massive amount of problems, and there's some pretty heavy rain falling now in the St. Louis area, and this entire mess is going to track right on into Indiana, parts of Illinois, western Kentucky, western Tennessee. In fact, if we look at the National Weather Service map, you can see all of this area painted in the green, indicating flash flood, either watches, current warnings going on, or flood potential as rivers continue to rise as the rainfall seeps into the ground in what's called these catchment basins. Catchment basins, these are geographic and geologic terms for basically the river basins that the rainfall falls into, and then it eventually sort of filters into the rivers themselves, causing them to rise after the fact. And that's what's going to be happening through this area. And then eventually all of this will continue to move off to the east-northeast with time, exiting somewhere along the mid-Atlantic states over the next few days. And then out in the southwest, we still have the very dangerous heat conditions in the typical suspect areas, as well as pretty high heat index values and the accompanying misery that goes with that in portions of the Carolinas and extreme eastern Georgia. No let up in sight for that, it appears, unfortunately, because this big ridge of high pressure that's been sitting over this area is going to kind of reinforce itself over the next few days. And again, that's why Bill came in here and is going to go around the ridge instead of coming up out of the Gulf and into the Florida Panhandle ahead of a big trough or something. That didn't happen because of this big, strong ridge. So what is the outlook for the next several days? Well, the tropical Atlantic is completely shut down right now due to this strong capping from the Saharan air layer. Very, very intense dust outbreak, dry air, stable air. A little bit of a tropical wave here, fairly low in latitude, but it has virtually no chance because of this strong cap, this blanket that's been put over the region, so nothing's going to develop out that way. And we wouldn't expect it to, but this sort of reinforces that notion. So the MJO forecast for the next couple of weeks, remember, we had a very active period in the tropics when the MJO went wildly active through most of June, and now going to go into the null phase, so we shouldn't see much activity at all, maybe amplifying again towards phase 8 in about 10 to 15 days or so, but that's going to be 2 weeks from now. We'll see what happens. This is fairly typical, though. We see it kind of go round and round and round the globe every year. Sometimes it's easier to discern than others. This year it's been fairly easy to pick it out, this MJO activity. That was a very strong signal. If we see that forecast again, then we can probably bet on tropical cyclone development in the western Pacific, followed by the eastern Pacific, and maybe even the Atlantic Basin, Gulf of Mexico, extreme southwest Atlantic. But that's not going to be until the end of the month and into July, if it happens at all. The Euro agrees for the most part, except that it's more amplified towards the western Pacific, and that's what I was just alluding to, that this is typically where we'll see the activity start, and then it'll eventually move around these different octants of the MJO, and we might sometime in mid-July see another uptick in activity for the Atlantic Basin, but I doubt it, because typically that is a very low time of activity anyway. But we'll see. We'll worry about that when and if it gets here. So just for fun, this is the 384-hour sort of speaking to that effect here. If we look at these two charts and what it's forecasting for the next 2 weeks, and then you go look at the 2-week forecast from the GFS, yeah, when you see a 1032 millibar high parked over the central Atlantic, very strong trade winds coming around that, so that's going to mean more dry air coming off Africa, and any activity that does develop is going to have to do so somewhere in this box, and probably not down here, honestly. Very strong trades blasting through the Caribbean typically doesn't let anything develop. So this is your pattern that shows there's really no hurricane activity, and but this is also typical for July also. So at least things are fairly normal. We're not seeing anything ridiculously out of place, either with too many hurricanes developing or other items that cause, hey, wonder what's going on with that. This is a very typical pattern for July, and at least it means that the weekend ahead we won't have anything to worry about except for the remnants of Bill. You folks in Kentucky, Indiana, and then moving on into the mid-Atlantic states can expect some periods of heavy rain, and then Bill will move out over the Atlantic. We'll see, maybe it'll regenerate some. Water temperature is not that far from 80 degrees across the potential path once it exits out over the Atlantic early next week, but at least it won't bother anybody. We'll watch it then. Have a great weekend. Thanks as always for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again on Monday.